Japan is very doing, actually. Japan is a very doing country. They work long hours, they have few vacations, their school year is 1,000 hours a year. And look at Finland. Finland is a being country. Their school year is only 600 hours, and the results are quite similar. Doing people tend to spend more of their time indoors because you can get more done indoors than outdoors. In the US, their school year is about 1,100 hours, and their results leave a lot to be desired. So it's not about how much time you spend doing this is going to automatically translate to these results. You cannot make that connection. Being people tend to be more hospitable. They enjoy your visit to the max by seeing you pleased. Doing cultures, like the US for example, say, help yourself. Which is not bad. It's still better than Holland, which is even more doing. In Holland, you're happy if you get a second cup of tea and boterkoek. Their doing cultures are not particularly hospitable ones. At home, that is. Being people will stay at the restaurant until closing. Doing people will be subtly pushed out by the waitstaff trying to clear the table for new patrons. It's quite a different situation. Now, is it possible for a being and doing person to work together? I'm going to leave that up to you. Now, are you a particularist, or are you a universalist? Okay, you're driving with a friend. He's driving a little bit too fast, and he hits a cyclist. Big trouble. Would you lie in court for your friend? Or would you just say, I wasn't looking? Or would you tell the truth? Because everyone must live by the same rules and laws. That's the difference between a particularist who judges the situation based on the here and now. This is a particular situation, and I will make my decision based on this situation alone. Or if you're a universalist, you think everybody is the same, the law applies to everybody across the board, and there are no exceptions. Now, Swiss managers in the study were the ones who least would lie in court to save their friend. With the US was a close second. These are all very universalist countries. They wouldn't lie for a friend because they think that the law goes above loyalty to a friend. It's a dilemma. One of these, this against the other, is an ethical dilemma of weighing your obligations against your values and the circumstances. Your friend broke the law. Now, if you're a universalist, that's more important than the fact that he's your friend. Universalist cultures use a lot of contracts. Everything's in writing. Particularist cultures have things more verbal. They do have contracts in business, but their contracts are not long-term fixed contracts because things change. Situations change. There might be a shortage of zinc or a general labor strike, and one of the parties in the business cannot live up to its bargain. Now, in a universalist country, they're in big trouble because they have a contract, it's written, and that's the way it has to be. In a particularist country, like China and India, for example, you won't see long-term fixed contracts. One party's situation changes, they explain it to the other party, and they come to an understanding and a compromise. That's just the way things are done there. If you enter into a long-term contract with a Chinese person, don't be surprised if they try to change the rules halfway down the road. And it doesn't mean that they're not honest. It just means that they are trying to adapt to the situation as it changed, and they hope you change along with them. In some places, particularist particularist countries are often associated with bribery. You have to sometimes grease somebody's palm to get what's supposed to be free, because they judge the situation on how you look, what you're dressed. In Czech Republic, it's quite a balance between these two. The police are quite particularist. If you ever get stopped by a police, your fine, how much you have to pay, will depend on if you're a foreigner, what you're wearing, what kind of car you're driving, the officer's mood, his quota. All these things will weigh when he announces how much you have to pay in a penalty. In a universalist country like the US, everybody has to pay the same fine for the same violation. Okay? This is about facial expressions. Neutral versus affective. Remember Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans? You see the news videos of the situation? The Americans are screaming. They're screaming bloody murder. They're screaming. They bleeped out what they were saying because it was full of expletives and full of obscenities. They were screaming, okay, in Japan, they had a tsunami and an earthquake. They were scared, but you couldn't see it on their faces. True. Japan is a very neutral country. Americans are quite affective in their expressiveness. The damage done in the Katrina and the tsunami was quite similar. But you could see in their faces that one country was a lot more affected than the other. Some countries are very neutral, like the UK, like Scandinavia, Germany, the Netherlands. They don't show much expression on their face. If you do something unusual, they say, "Do normal," because they don't want anybody to stand out or show any effectiveness in their expression. Whereas Poland, France, Spain, Italy, very effective cultures. You can look at them and you can see the difference. In neutral countries, interrupting is frowned upon. One person is supposed to speak at the same time. Czechs are quite a neutral country. They don't show much emotion. And in Czech, they think it's impossible for two people to speak at the same time. Coming from New York, that is very frustrating for me. If you've ever seen a Woody Allen movie, you know what I mean. We are all talking at the same time. This facilitates information flow. But no, not here. Not here. You have to wait until the other person finishes, and then you can speak. Very frustrating for me. In Japan, they have earthquake warnings on SMS. So if there's an earthquake warning, they send out SMSs, and you see the Japanese checking the phone. Oh, it's just another earthquake. In San Francisco, oh my God! Big difference in their facial expressions. Just by, you can see it based on the stimuluses that the people are going through, information and things that they're getting, information and how they react to that. Now, I want to briefly introduce you to this. Don't have much time to talk about this. Paul Ekman, genius, came up with 6 basic facial expressions that were universal across the world. There are a lot of emotions. But in different cultures and different countries, people's facial expression will show something different. Okay? Envy, or love, okay, or embarrassment. That will be different from culture to culture, their facial expressions. But these 6 are pretty much the same all over the world. These micro expressions that he developed, which is, micro expression is when somebody, for example, goes like, if you tell somebody bad news and they go really quick, Schadenfreude, they're happy that you had some bad news. Okay, you can see that. Of course, they don't want you to see that, so they'll go back. So Ekman studied all these micro expressions all over the world, and he came up with a facial action coding system, FACS. This facial action coding system has proven very useful in law enforcement and in intelligence gathering, and also by telling if people are lying. Okay, because these facial expressions, they're very quick. They could be just a little nostril, a little movement of the nostril, and that means something. So if you're interested, you can look up FACS and there are software programs to train you in recognizing facial expressions and micro expressions. It's really very interesting. Now, if you're in another culture, if you don't know whether to be neutral or effective, you have to just follow other people's lead. How animated this discussion is going to be. Just follow the leads and you'll do fine. Limit your, don't brag. Okay, bragging's bad. And don't also make these self-effacing comments. Don't embarrass yourself, even though you mean it as a joke. But from a person from a neutral country, they might be embarrassed for you. So you really have to be as neutral as possible when dealing with neutral countries. And when you're in a country like Italy, don't be afraid to use your hands up and down. Okay, the last one, social norms. If you're in a tight country or a loose country, well, if you've ever been, I've never been, but if you've ever been on a flight to Saudi Arabia, you look at the in-flight magazines, they're censored. The pages are cut out of bikinis, or there's black tape pasted on the pictures. The films that they show on the flight, they'll have this blur from the neck down, if it's a beautiful girl. This censorship is the example of a very tight culture. Tight culture is about what should and what should not be. It sometimes is related to religious countries, but not always. For example, Japan. Japan is a very tight culture, but they're not religious at all. So you cannot always make that connection. Women leaders. Women are doing very well in looser countries than in tight countries, in politics and in business. And free speech. Livermore calls free speech the holy grail of a loose country. In some tight places, you can't say what you want to say. That's closely determined by the tightness of the country. Now, if you don't know whether you're in a tight or a loose country, look at the work cubicles of the employees. If their cubicle is full of jokes and pictures and color, that's probably a loose country. If it's clean and nothing controversial at all is pasted on their cubicle walls, chances are you're in a tight country. I will define tight versus loose as the tolerance of deviating from the norm. Every country has their norms. Loose countries are able to deviate from that norm more, like Holland, for example. Holland's a very loose country. They minimize the amount of laws where common sense would otherwise prevail. They say, use your common sense. We're not going to make a law about this. Very loose country. If you make a faux pas in a tight culture, like eating with your left hand, something like that, you might be chastised. If you make a faux pas in a loose country, it's no big deal. Okay, where does tight and loose actually come from? What created this dichotomy in cultures? Actually, it's the more isolated countries are the tighter ones. The countries that developed isolated tend to be tighter. Of course, now globalization means that isolation is becoming is rarer and rarer, and therefore some cultures are becoming looser and looser. Okay, now just final background. Where do these cultures come from? Where do these rules come from? Why do cultures do what they do? And the answer is survival. Countries had to survive from the beginning. How they survived led to these attitudes and norms and values. For example, in a farming culture, you cannot do farming alone. Farming, agricultural countries, are more collectivist, like China. Hunting is a very individual. You needed food, you went out and hunted. Vikings hunted. Scandinavia is very individualist. It's all about how the country survived from then until now, is how these values and norms developed. All the developments from food to transportation to national security all took the shape of these norms all the way up until today. Now, we all have to survive, even with globalization, and a good way to survive is to not automatically assume that you understand the other person. And don't automatically assume that the other person understood what you say. You want to confirm understanding at every step of the way. I would say if there is one piece of advice that I can give to anybody who's dealing with another culture is confirm understanding. This way you'll be in the same place at the same time as the other person with the same intention. Otherwise, without realizing it, you misunderstood the person and you end up in a karaoke room full of his drunk friends. Which is also not the worst thing in the world, but it's not what you bargained for. These are the 10 listed for you right here. We don't have much time for a discussion, but I'd like to answer any questions if you had. Please. If you had a question, what would it be?
Yeah, you said about Swiss people in Switzerland, and can we do like generalization about Switzerland because they speak like French language, German, and Italian, so it like makes the culture maybe a bit.
Good point. Actually, you're right. The Italian Swiss are more expressive, more effective than the German Swiss, without a doubt. Germans are really very direct. They're the most direct culture in the world, actually. Words are everything. When you're dealing with so much money, you better be specific. So that's why Swiss became like that. Please, if you had a question, what would it be? Yes?
What about creativity in China? Because we're talking pretty much about China, and because they are so, they know with the authorities. So, is there any possibility for them to be creative, actually?
It's really hard. In China, there's one answer to an essay question. And there's no room for interpretation. They don't accept new ideas on exams. So there's not much room for creativity there.
And what about in the research? Because there you need new opinions and new science.
They do a lot of reverse engineering, which is not particularly creative. But I'm sure there must be some innovation in China. China is perhaps the most rapidly changing country in the world. So what's valid yesterday might not even be valid today. If your question is how creative and how proactive, or how much can we give a Chinese person to think for himself, it's really tough. There's not much room for that.
So at the moment you are educated and experienced in this concept, has it helped you in some situations, significant situation in your life already?
Absolutely.
Because you said it's already changed yourself a little bit.
Well, I learned from trial and error, because when I first started traveling, I didn't know about this. So I left the States 25 years ago, and I've been traveling around since then. And a lot of the things that I realized I had to learn the hard way. And ever since I became involved with emotional intelligence, social intelligence, and now this, it's been easier. It's really been easier.
And can you say there is some like more or less optimal combination of a particular country with the perfect combination of?
You mean for an individual to be a perfect combination, or a culture?
Culture.
What's the perfect combination culture?
Like not perfect, but optimal.
I like Czech Republic. Because I think that Czech Republic is such a delightful balance of all these things. That's why I've chosen here. But that's only my opinion. You're going to get a different answer from somebody else. Please, a couple more. Mm-hmm.
I have a more general question about globalization and the culture. You showed us that all these things, they depend on the individuality in the whole world. And now when the globalization came in, then it seems to me that all these individualities and these diversity will disappear,
Mhm.
will be blended. And what do you think? Do you think that in, I don't know, 20, 50, 100 years?
Couple of hundred.
Yeah, we will be like one.
His question is-
culture?
Let me summarize your question. That because of globalization and technology and communications, everybody is interconnected now. It's a smaller world, and distances are smaller. What does that mean for cultures? Are they going to be unifying, kind of gelling together? Or can they resist this change? And the answer is they cannot resist the change. It's going to change, but it's going to take hundreds of years. Or 100 years, I don't know. But they're definitely changing, definitely becoming more, certainly slowly but surely more uniform. Slowly but surely. I don't know about surely, but definitely slowly.
Isn't it sad?
Yeah, it's sad, but what can we do about it? I would say if you're going to go to, if you go to a country, let's see, which is a good example, a good country to go to sooner rather than later because it's changing so rapidly. If you went to China 10 years ago and China today, you would see the difference everywhere you go. It's visible, these differences.
So you suggest us to travel more, even though that it enriches the globalization, if I may say?
I don't know if any one of us has enough influence to change a culture. Actually, I'm pretty sure we don't. So luckily for us, we're just an outsider looking in. Do as much traveling now because things are becoming more westernized, more globalized, and you will miss out on something if you wait too long. I can't think of a good country as an example now which has changed so much, although many of them are, but I can't think of which is maybe the best example of it besides China. But I know that there are other places. The Baltic republics.
I feel that it's much
Mm-hmm. The changes have been greater in the Baltic republics. Mm-hmm. I believe it. Yeah. One more. Okay, feel free to look me up if you want to find me. My name is on the invitation. You can Google, there's an email there. And I'll send you some material if you want. I have lots of materials. This is there's only like 8 slides in this, but I have a lot more PowerPoints, PDFs, and documents on this topic and others. So feel free.
Thank you, Howard.